Chapter 19. After waiting for an hour, Billy crept to the comp panel inset next to the storeroom's door and carefully switched it on. She managed to activate a monitor after a little effort, and what she saw was 3 Marines being herded down a hall by 2 strange men with guns. Billy sucked in a fast breath. What was going on? A few minutes with the computer gave her very little more. The ship was in the hands of some invading group. Who were they? Why had they attacked the ship? How had they managed to overcome a military vessel full of armed Marines? What about Wilkes and Mitch? She couldn't find Mitch, but some switching did give her an image of Wilkes. He was being held at gunpoint by a tall, fair-haired man. Oh gods, what was she going to do? The man talking to Massey was strange, Wilkes saw, and after a moment he realized why. The man was an android, one they hadn't bothered to do a full cosmetic on. Must be an expendable, and, Wilkes also realized, one that didn't worry fuck all about the first law for robots and androids, never to kill a human. How in the hell had the pirate managed to pull that one off? Is everybody accounted for? Massey asked. Yes, sir, the android replied. We lost 2 units during the operation. 4 Marines died as a result of wounds incurred during takeover. 2 more are seriously injured. 2 Marines were killed by Stevens previously. We have all the remaining Marines and ship's crew in custody, cross-checked and matched, although there is an anomaly. What's the problem? The initial Marine head count after hypersleep arousal shows +1. Massey turned to look at Wilkes. Well? Stevens miscounted. He was a stupid asshole. Massey said to the android, Double check the names and ID numbers. We don't need any loose cannons on board. Sir. You got balls, whoever you are, Wilkes said, to attack a government ship. What's the point? To keep a greedy competitor from stealing my company's money. Competitor. If you represent a company, you should know the government doesn't compete with private concerns. Sure it does. They want to round up some of these valuable aliens and develop them as weaponry. You don't think they'll sell the results to anybody with the money to pay for them? Wilkes shook his head. You don't know what you're fucking with here. These things have wiped out a couple of colonies. I know more than you think, Sergeant. You see, we already have one of these things on Earth. Our mission here is to make sure nobody else gets one before we can exploit our advantage. That, and gathering whatever information we can to help things along. Their favourite food, lighting, environment, things like that. For all we know, these things aren't the top dogs on their world. They could be like mice. You have an alien on Earth. Yep. I haven't seen it myself, but I understand it's an ugly beast. Buddha. He can't help you, Sergeant. I'm your god now. Billy huddled against a crate, thinking. She could probably hide here for a long time without anybody finding her. She wasn't listed on the crew or Marine manifests. Somebody might tell the invaders about her, of course, but maybe not. Then again, staying here wouldn't help things. Mitch could be dead or wounded. She'd seen bodies being spaced last time she tried the monitors. Sooner or later, she'd have to find water and food. If they didn't know about her, she might be able to do something to help. The ship's ventilation system was big enough in places for her to move through it. She'd had experience in hiding from when she was a kid and the aliens had taken over the colony. If you were quiet and quick, you could survive. She'd done it before. And she had to find out what happened to Mitch. If he'd been killed, then nothing mattered anymore. If he was still alive, she could find out, could do something to help him. She stood. Yes, she wasn't going to spend whatever remained of her life cowering in the darkness, waiting to be found and eliminated, like some vermin. At the very least, she could go down fighting. In the APC bay, Massey and Wilkes watched the landing craft being loaded. The Marines were herded into the vessel by the guards, all of whom were androids. You'll stay here, Massey said to Wilkes. Why? Because I wish it so. We have enough worms for our hooks. You're sending my men to be slaughtered? Yes, but my forces will cover them from the air pods as best they can. They're already down there buzzing around, setting up cover patterns. Live bait works better than dead, according to my information. Bastard. Not true. Both my parents stayed alive until I was 9. Then I killed them. Wilkes watched the squads marching onto the dropship. The atmosphere is marginal down there, Massey said. Little short on the oxy side, long on the CO2 and other trash gases. Got some methane and ammonia that'll probably make their eyes burn and noses run. Extended exposure will be fatal, but I doubt anybody will be there that long. Wilkes said nothing. They were in deep shit. The only bright spot seemed to be that Massey and his thugs hadn't found out about Billy. They would, eventually, when they strained enough of the ship's logs to get to Stephen's personal stuff, and she was probably on a monitor recording. Sooner or later, somebody would ask the computer the right question, and it would give them Billy. He hoped she found a good place to hide, and stayed there. Inside the APC, Bueller sat at his station, waiting for the ship to drop. He'd been prepared to meet the aliens, but not like this. Not unarmed and marched across the ground by enemies in air pods. They wouldn't have a prayer against those things, even if only half of what Wilkes said had been accurate. Still, there was nothing to be done about it. A direct confrontation with the androids guarding them would mean a fast death. As long as they stayed alive, there was a chance they might be able to do something to survive. He thought about Billy. He hoped she had kept hidden. If he could be sure of that, then dying wasn't so bad. Amazing that somebody like him could fall in love. Amazing, but true enough. The whine of the propellers cycling up and lifting the ship free of the grapples for the drop interrupted Bueller's thoughts. I love you, Billy, he said to himself. Goodbye. Billy crawled through a stacked plastic tube, only a few centimeters bigger than she was. It was hard, slow, rough on her hands and arms as she dragged herself along, but it wasn't as if she had a whole lot of choice. Wilkes found himself in one of the forward storerooms, alone, the door locked and guarded by a pair of Massey's androids. Things didn't look good for the home team. Massey sat in front of the telemetry array, watching the feeds from the APC and helmet cams the Marines wore. The usual life systems input wasn't there. The Colonial Marines must be on a tight budget these days. Well, that didn't matter. He didn't care if they died. He only needed another specimen or two and whatever information he could gather on the aliens' homeworld. Plenty of that coming in. The APC sensors gathered it up. Gravity, atmosphere, lighting, weather conditions, all kinds of readings, and spewed it into the Benedict's recorders. Offhand, it didn't look a lot like a world that was going to become a vacation spot anytime soon. Gravity was a bit higher than Terran standard, maybe a G and a quarter, so fat people and those with heart conditions wouldn't like it much, even if it happened to look like paradise, and in no way did it look inviting. The local star made most of the planet tropical, at least weather-wise. There were small ice caps at the poles, but even the more temperate regions would give you body heat plus a couple of degrees. Vegetation was sparse, the oceans were full of nasty salts, and there didn't seem to be many places where an unprotected human could survive even without killer locals prowling for supper. The poisoned air would require full-time niters or implants. Looked like a place to dump garbage to Massey. "Commander, we are breaking through the overcast," came the android pilot's voice. "I hear you." Massey switched to the nose cam in the APC. The hologram lit the air to his left, showing a swirl of clouds that flew past and thinned. Under the cloud cover, the land below was dull and grey. Scraggly trees, or what passed for them. Lots of young igneous rock exposed to the air, sharp edges and dirty colours. Got a big thunderstorm, 40 clicks ahead, the co-pilot said. Top's up to 20,000 meters. Look at the voltage on that lightning. Go around the storm, Massey ordered. Find me a nest of the things and put down within a couple of kilometers. Don't want our Marines to get too tired on their walk. Copy, Commander. Massey watched the shifting pictures. So far, this mission had gone exactly as he had planned, right on the nose. It was almost boring. Maybe something would happen down there to spice things up a little. Billy found that the ventilation tube opened into one of the small kitchens. Nobody seemed to be around, and so she slid down the shaft and wiggled her way onto a microwave oven top. She quickly climbed to the floor. Most of the food preparation on the Benedict consisted of heating and opening SMPs. That didn't require anything more than pulling and twisting a tab. Nobody produced wonderful meals for dinner here, but there were some special occasions when something a bit more elaborate than field rations might be called for. Visiting officers, an ambassador perhaps. So the kitchen could be used to make a soy pro cutlet or a stew, maybe even a pie or cake. And therefore there were implements. Billy dug through all the cabinets until she found a combination knife and vegetable peeler with a U-shaped slotted extrusion pointed for coring. The edges were serrated on one side and sharp on the other. The blade was only as long as her forefinger. Not much of a weapon, but she could stab somebody with it if she could get close enough. A better find was a tapered hollow plastic tube that could be filled with liquid and frozen to make a rolling pin. Billy triggered the freezer in the handle, and in about 20 seconds the liquid inside turned solid. It was cold in her grip, but heavy and solid. She could bash in a skull with it. Again, it wasn't as good as a gun, but it was better than nothing. She hefted the rolling pin. Now all she had to do was sneak up behind a whole shipful of armed men and whack each one on the head. Simple, right? She chuckled to herself. You've lost your mind for sure this time, kid. Still, it felt better to be doing something. Massey watched from the remote hovercam as the Marines marched out onto the surface of the alien world, in full gear, except for weapons. 6 of his own troops floated in 3 small open-air podcraft over the walking Marines. The androids in the pods were armed, and the Marines below knew that they could either do as they were told, or be cut down. Sensors watched and listened and smelled and tasted and fed the results to Massey. He monitored his androids as they spoke to each other on their corns. Move pretty well for men who don't have enough oxygen to breathe. We in jeopardy here? That's a negative. The alien life form is ground-based. Massey mentally tuned out the chatter. His plan was simple enough. He would march the Marines into the nearest hive, where the aliens could grab them and implant eggs in them. Then he would send his androids in to retrieve them. Stevens had been instructed to refuse to allow plasma rifles on his ship, but Massey had enough such weapons and charges on the company vessel to outfit a small army. However tough the aliens might be, they couldn't stand up to energy blasts that would blow holes in Durasteel armor plate easier than a man could poke his finger through damp tissue paper. No, that wasn't going to be a problem. Once he had a specimen or two and all the information he could collect, he would head back to Earth. Maybe, after that, the company could find him something difficult to do. He laughed aloud. It was tough, being the best. You had to invent your own challenges. Maybe he would quit the company, go to work for some smaller, hungrier concern, turn against the people who now fed him, and bite their hand just a few times, just to show them he could do it. Yes, that had a certain appeal to it. Ah well, best to not get too overconfident. One mission at a time. You didn't get to be the best by making mistakes, and counting embryos before the eggs were fertilized was unwise. He turned back to the holograms and information flow in front of him. One mission at a time.